How is everybody today? I started a roll sheet on the back row, so be sure and sign the roll so that you get credit for being here. Today we need to move into talking about organizational buying behavior because organizations are an important part of marketing, and it's a huge market that we might want to tap into. In our professional sales program, for those of you that are interested in the sales program, I've talked a lot about the sales program because it's one that I'm really proud of. It's the one program that we have where we have a huge success rate in terms of the placement, 100% placement of our majors and minors, and most of those students are going to go into business-to-business, B2B sales. And so it's an important area, understanding organizational behavior. When we talked about consumer behavior, I said that there were sort of three models. There was the rational actor model, the irrational actor model, and then the synthesis model. So for today's critical thinking challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to consider this question. Are organizations, and consider all three types, profit, nonprofit, and governmental, more rational than individual consumers? Why or why not? So I'm going to give you about 10 or 15 minutes to do this. I want you to develop a brief 5-paragraph response to the challenge. You should have an introduction with a thesis. What would be a thesis? Organizations are more rational than individuals, or organizations are not more rational than individuals. So what you can do for this 5-paragraph essay is you can have an introduction. It should have at least 3 sentences. 3 is the minimum. So your thesis statement, organizations are or are not more rational than individuals. This is evidenced by the fact, for example, look at the following examples, and then have 3 examples, and then you should have 3 sentences in each of those paragraphs. So at least three sentences for your first paragraph, 3 sentences for your substantive example that has a transition to the next. That's how we're going to establish a nexus between them, that logical connection. So I'm getting you to practice this writing skill that you're going to have to do for your individual papers. 3 substantive examples and then a logical conclusion that again follows or flows from those 3 examples above with that connection, that nexus. So have a transitional sentence between the last one and then your conclusion. I'll give you 15 minutes to do this. I will tell you that if you really want to earn the bonus points, making the case that businesses are more rational is very easy. But you can make a case that businesses are equally as irrational as individuals. And I can think of one big reason why that you can make that argument. And that would probably, if you can make that argument and support it, probably be the one that earns you the bonus points. If you take the easy road is businesses are more rational, right? Why are businesses more rational? Well, because if they're not, they go out of business. So that's the easy one. So I'll give you about 15 minutes to do that. And then what we're going to do in terms of the order of the critical thinking, in terms of presenting your spokesperson, we will start from the bottom up. So here's the list. So we'll start with the young stallions. The second to go will be the office. The third, the moms. Fourth, almost organized, marketing anonymous. Then infinite horizons all the way until we get up to the top, get her done. So that's my randomization for the day. So get your groups. You have 15 minutes. You have until the end of the day today to submit it to the Dropbox on D2L for your critical thinking challenge. Again, the bonus points, if you can argue that they're irrational, is probably the one that's going to win the bonus points. Okay. You can see that I created the Dropbox that says organizational behavior and rational actor. All right, so is everybody back? The young stallions get to go first. I'll randomize this from time to time, and we'll do a different list. But this time we'll do bottom up. Next time we'll do top down. Then maybe we'll start in the middle and alternate to make it fair. So what did the young stallions come up with?
Businesses were more rational than consumers.
Okay, why?
Because obviously
Okay.
Also, there's more input in buying when talking about business and businesses versus things for business.
Okay.
So there's more input.
So there's more people involved, so you're more likely to get a better decision making because of the number of actors. It's not just one person making the decision. Okay.
Consumers generally buy for their wants, like impulse buys, or companies look at the needs of the company. And consumers can only be in like one location, where businesses can be like all over the United States. So they're more rational about that area and what that area.
Okay, they actually engage in market research to determine whether or not it's feasible for them to exist. But do consumers always really make decisions based on an individual preference, or do they actually engage in group decision making? For example, in a household, do families have to budget their money and think about purchasing decision making within the context? So there are group decisions that are oftentimes made in a household. And generally, don't you think spouses talk to each other about things before they make a major purchase?
Yes.
I mean, the fastest way to get a divorce is to go out and buy that Ferrari, right? Yeah, the microwave was that created consternation in my household. But you know, if I went out and bought a Lamborghini or something like that, or we now have a Maserati dealership here in Edmond. If I went out and bought the Maserati, is that not likely to lead to some consternation of scarce resources? Okay, all right. I think that's a good solid answer. Who's representing the office? What did you all say?
So we basically said that the consumer is more rational than the business. We came up with one large idea that, yes, a business or corporation has many people. However, there's that opportunity of unethical behavior that can come about with that. We decided that more so the idea of somewhat of like groupthink, where if somebody has the idea of skimming off of maybe like profit or, for example, with the government, Watergate, things like that, they're not going towards their goal. And so if one person does it, they're just going to follow along. So again, with the example of Watergate, we have the idea of the president. Nobody really said, no, that's not a good idea to go and sabotage things, and he ended up getting caught for it. So.
Yeah, the similar thing happened at Enron, right? The accounting department, I mean, you would think that these people who have had accounting ethics and things like that would stand up and say, hey, wait, you shouldn't do this. This is really, really kind of sketchy to basically be offloading all this debt onto special project entities. And yet there was just this group, that was the mentality, that was the corporate culture at Enron that allowed it to spin and go out of control, was that it was, screw the numbers, live on the edge, and just, file the reports. And so I think, yeah, there's a tendency in groups to have a group dynamic. Peer pressure is enormously important, and so corporate culture can play a role in that, and that is an example of how they can become irrational. Good job. All right.
We chose to argue that individuals tend to be more irrational than groups in organizations. One of our main points was that businesses have incentive to make rational decisions, because if they don't, they might even go out of business. So you have a sort of survival of the fittest kind of thing going on. And that's not necessarily true with individuals. Like, a person could make constantly make bad financial decisions, but they'll continue to keep living. And
maybe not well.
Yeah, maybe not so well, but like, there's still people that live in poverty, continue to live in poverty despite incentive to get out.
Yeah, when I practiced bankruptcy law, I had one family that I took through bankruptcy every 7 years. And they just sort of engaged in bankruptcy planning every 7 years. We're going to go broke and just discharge all our debts. It's harder to do after the 2005 amendments. Yeah.
And as an example of an institution, like government institutions are on like a limited budget, so they have to constantly consider how to distribute their resources. So because of that, they have to put more thought into their decisions than like an individual would necessarily have to.
Okay. All right. I think that's a good job. Very good. Almost organized. Now, the thing that I really think is interesting about almost organized was at the last critical thinking, they were the first ones to submit their response to the critical thinking challenge, which to me says that they're more than almost organized. They were actually highly organized and won bonus points for their submission. So I'm interested to see how organized you are this time. Or if you've reverted back to the almost, barely organized.
We argued that businesses are as irrational as consumers.
Okay.
Some of our points included that businesses are made of irrational people that make irrational decisions. And sometimes they'll engage in group things so they can't get out of those irrational decisions. Sometimes factors other than profit maximization will go into making their decisions, so it doesn't always pan out to be a rational choice. And then consumers can manipulate them into making decisions that don't necessarily result in them meeting their goals or obtaining their goals in a rational way.
Okay. I think your point about that businesses are made up of individuals and they act irrationally is insightful. One of the things that I remember, I have a colleague that we have a consulting firm together. She got her PhD in hotel, restaurant, tourism management from OSU, and my PhD's in marketing. And she started out actually as a product development specialist at Sonic. That's how she got interested in doing market research. And then she left Sonic and went to OSU to get her PhD, but she still does consulting work for Sonic. And one of the things that she would say that was very interesting about Sonic was they would go in and they would say, here's our product analysis of this stuff. And the guy who was head of Sonic now is named Cliff Hudson. He was their general counsel before he was elevated to the CEO position. And he would be sitting in a meeting and all of a sudden he would just pop up and say, margarita cherry slush. That's what I think we should do. And she would be like, we didn't even test that. And he's like, I like margarita cherry slushes, so I think that's what we should do. And she would say, but you're not our demographic. Who does Sonic sell to? What's their target demographic? It's what?
Oklahoma.
No, their target demographic is your age group. It's primarily women of your age group, of millennials and Gen Xers. What is Cliff Hudson? He's not a millennial and not a woman. And so they would be like, that makes no sense. And sure enough, they would go off down the road, selling, margarita cherry slushes. So you can have that groupthink mentality. And nobody would question it. So that's an example. Okay? Anything else? Okay, very good. It's not that they target them, it's just that tends to be the demographic that goes to Sonic, more so. Yeah, a lot of soccer moms on the way, it's a convenient place to stop and get, particularly their happy hour drinks for some reason.
All right, so we kind of decided to argue that businesses are irrational, partially because of what you mentioned about how businesses fail, and a lot of them fail within the first 5 years, 95%.
95%.
A lot of that's probably in part due to things like they don't do market analysis. They don't think of what happened in the past, can I improve upon? They try and take models that they see and just make a copy paste of them. Just take the template and work it. But sometimes there are a lot of things that make that work that in this case doesn't work. And and the government is in some ways just as bad. We're operating with way more debt than any real business could ever work with, for example. And there are a lot of things that can make the government fail or anything fail if you're not using rational decisions. And it could be argued that a lot of the decisions the government makes and a lot of new businesses make, not-for-profits make, they're all just banking them because some individual had, like you mentioned with Sonic, decided that was a good idea.
Yeah, I think particularly with the government example, I think that's a really important example because Congress is made up of 535 members, 100 senators, 435 members of the House of Representatives, and they all have one thing in mind, and that's getting reelected. And so they're going to fight for their own district, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make good decisions. We have a huge amount of debt, and if you start saying, well, we're going to cut the debt, even Republicans who don't like debt, if you say we're going to cut Tinker, you can guarantee that our senators from this state are going to rise up and rail against anything that resembles cutting Tinker Air Force Base. Now, should we have an Air Force Base in the middle of the country? That Air Force Base is a logistics base, and they do, for a long time, their mission was to fly the AWACS, which are a reconnaissance airplane. If you're going to fly reconnaissance, you're having to fly over the entire country to get to where did we fly over for that during the Cold War? Oh, Russia. Seems like maybe you should have it in Sarah Palin's backyard. You remember Sarah Palin? I can see Russia from my house. Maybe you should have it in her backyard and not in the middle of Oklahoma.
Yes, where a lot of individuals can make things that will benefit, or decisions that will benefit them, but not for necessarily,
not the country.
or even trying for everyone.
Right. So that's a good point. You all should watch the vice presidential debate tonight. It's an example of political marketing. It's the only one you'll get to see. The vice presidential candidates only debate once. And this is the person that will be a heartbeat away from the presidency. So you should watch the political marketing event of the evening, which is the vice presidential debate tonight. All right, good job. I think it starts at 8 Central, I think. But don't quote me.
So we decided that businesses are irrational, they're not rational, because they focus on, by all means, making profits and keeping costs low, by any means necessary usually. And well, it's kind of irrational to start with, like he was just saying, because the first 5 years, if all of us made a business, only one of us is going to be successful, so.
Well, there's about 5 of you would be successful in here.
Kind of irrational.
Okay, so you think starting a business in and of itself is irrational?
Yeah, doing business are successful.
Okay.
But they're going to make profit by any means necessary, like Wells Fargo, what they just were caught doing, opening accounts for people illegally, and it's irrational.
Well, maybe that was a rational decision if you want to increase profitability. The irrational part was getting caught.
Right.
Maybe you need to be a better criminal.
Right. And then also like labor conditions. A lot of businesses will talk about how they want what's best for their employees. They care about their employees, but they'll outsource to other countries or open factories in very, very, very low cost countries like Asia and China and wherever.
Now, is that actually irrational? To say one thing and do another?
Morally irrational.
I don't know. One of the things, I took African political systems when I was in my undergraduate because I was a political science major. And one of the things that I remember was English businesses were going to Ghana. And the independence leader of Ghana was a guy named Kwame Nkrumah. And these businessmen went to him and they said, Dr. Nkrumah, you're saying things that sound like we shouldn't invest in your country because you might socialize our businesses. And he said, my mouth makes music. And what he meant was, don't listen to what I say to the people, look at what I do, which was I encourage investment and development in my country. But I have to appease the people, and so you can say one thing and do another. In Machiavelli's The Prince, he says you should appear to have piety, but not necessarily have it. Because appearances are reality. Yeah.
Should we actually rely upon the guy whose basis was killed at near the end of the book? After he wrote the book, wasn't the prince killed? The person who was writing all this?
No, I mean he gives examples of princes who lose their head.
I mean, not
and he
the
says,
story.
don't do
The
that.
actual guy he was basing it off of. Didn't he have?
No, he wrote it for Lorenzo the Magnificent. He didn't get killed.
Okay.
He did not. But that's who he wrote it for. Okay. Anything else?
And then the quality of product is also low because they want to make it as cheap as possible, and then also sometimes they'll make it so cheap that they'll break literally easily. and then causing consumers to just buy another one, buy another one, buy another one, and increase the profits.
Okay.
And just kind of to go off of that also, consumers are also irrational because of brand loyalty. Like the iPhone 6, do you want to buy one of those?
I have one.
And so how much did it cost to?
I don't remember what the iPhone, but they've released the iPhone 7 now, right? And so the idea is that we'll all run right out and buy the new model,
But according to Time Magazine, the iPhone 6 cost about $200 to make,
right?
as opposed to 600 or however much it was.
600 to buy it.
So you don't think that's rational of the company to do that?
What you might argue is not rational is the planned obsolescence. So Apple does this thing where they release product every so many years in an attempt to basically get you to buy the new model. Car companies did that in America. They used to release radically new models every year, and the idea was to create pressure and incentive to buy cars frequently. Well, a purchase like that, you can't sustain that model for very long. And what's happened to the iPhone 7 sales in Europe? Anybody know? They're dismal. Their sales are absolutely way off target. So they didn't really plan very well. All right. Anything else? That's it. All right. Good deal. Let's see how we met our partners.
You said that the organization and the individual are both irrational. An individual might think, I have the money for this, I want it now. But they don't think that maybe they should save that for an emergency. And an organization, an individual and organization or everybody can have the idea to get rich quick, and that they have an idea that they like, but that doesn't mean that everybody's gonna like it, and so, it could bomb, and then they go bankrupt, or
I think that's an important point. It's called projection. We have a tendency to project our own ideas onto other people and think that because we think something is really great, everybody thinks something's really great, and maybe it's not really great. It works really well if you're Steve Jobs and you're Apple computers and you can tell people what the cool thing is, but how many people actually can be innovators and leaders? Not many. I mean, most companies are going to have to stick with sort of trying what is known and doing market extensions rather than radical innovation. Because radical innovation, the fact that I think this is a wonderful idea doesn't mean that everybody else in the world is going to think it's a wonderful idea. You know, I like horses, I like big trucks, doesn't mean that everybody likes horses and big trucks, right? We have a tendency to project our own image onto other people, okay? What else?
and then just like not planning for what is going to happen next.
That's a very important point. Most businesses fail to engage in extensive market research or market planning or develop a really good marketing plan. Particularly small businesses, and most of you will go to work in your lifetime for a small to mid-sized business. And small business people are just struggling every day to keep up, and so they don't necessarily engage in absolute market planning. If you're in survival mode, you're not really focused on the long term, and you may engage in short-term sales goals in order and risk long-term profitability or maximization of return on investment. Okay, very good. Team efficiency.
All right, so our argument is that businesses and individuals are about equally irrational, give or take, for slightly different reasons though. The head of the company, CEO, whoever's in charge of decision making, they might have ego issues, there might be ethical issues involved since there's higher numbers of profit, and there's a certain number of like irrationality for people you just can't diversify away from. So, CEO ego. Let's say that cherry slush example from earlier, that's a really good example, but say the CEO has a buddy or a friend and they're responsible for a product and they want to, have this buddy or friend, take all the credit. So they'll put their idea and make that one the most likely one to be marketed out, sent out, sold, whatever, as opposed to like maybe the next best alternative.
Okay.
Another thing is that people are still people at the end of the day. If you have a bunch of people, like groups of people might be a little less irrational, but they still respond to stimuli in irrational ways. They're still people. No amount of diversification can really get rid of that risk. You're going to run into that no matter what.
Okay, so I think that's an important point. I think one of the things that you can run into is that if you have a lot of irrational people in a room together, all you're getting is what? If you input bad data, what are you going to get? Bad data. If you input bad data and you don't do the market research correctly, you're going to get crap for results, right? And so if you have a bunch of people, all of whom are in a room, the fact that you have a bunch of them making a decision may just make it more chaotic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially if you put too many people, that just makes it way worse.
Right.
And then at that level of business, I believe another example was made earlier on, not today specifically, but business students are more likely to have ethical breaches. So at those high levels, you might be making decisions that kind of ignore your ethics, because profits could be so much higher. That would be so great, but you're ignoring ethics, and you might make irrational decisions. You think you're irrational, but they end up breaching ethics or something, and you're in trouble.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is we've seen remarkable market failures, and this has not just happened recently. I mean, the most recent scandals are the subprime mortgage industry scandals that have been indicative of this. But if you go back in time, you find out that businesses have engaged in this kind of behavior for a long time. There's a book that details this called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And it goes back and it details all of the marketing failures that have occurred throughout history. And it starts with the Dutch tulip crisis. At one point in time, the Dutch tulip market and tulip bulbs were more valuable than gold. Now, how stupid is that? Although if you think about the value of gold, it's a completely arbitrary, artificial construct anyway. Okay, very good. Let's see, what do we got? The Terminators.
Okay, so the determinators argue that overall individuals are less rational and organizations are more rational. The examples are because we buy what we want when we want. For example, want an $8 beer at the fair. Who needs an $8 beer at the fair? Nobody. Now,
It's hot. You might need that $8 beer.
no, you might as well buy the irrational $3 water. That's what I did.
Okay.
Whereas my friend will buy an $8 beer. So, anyways, organizations will buy cheap in bulk wholesale prices, and then when they're overstocked, what do? They sell cheaper than what they were originally selling, but higher than their profit. So they're still making profit. And then our beers and whatever are based on feeling hot or emotion or whatever. And then, as I said before, organizations can go out of business. Sure, we can go broke, but we can also make more money. It's pretty difficult to reverse the fact that you went out of business. And then organizations focus on, they want to take into consideration the fact that they have shareholders, and so they want to accommodate the fact that people have invested in them and want more people to invest in them, because then they're more likely to continue on the profit-making path they're on. Anyways, individuals focus on them. If you're an individual, you focus on only yourself. Shareholders are not relevant to you as an individual. And however, I did say overall they're less rational versus more rational, but the reputation, of course, they're going to want to be more rational because they have a reputation at stake. But in the same sense, they can be irrational because of their brand. So they might tell you that it's the best, but they're lying. And rationality is based on facts. So lying about your brand being the best is not rational. And then also a good point to be made is studies that are for companies are often funded by the companies. So how factual are the studies if they fund them themselves? So then to break it down within each organization, Overall, I believe that nonprofits sway between rationality because there's not much incentive to be rational or irrational. So they could be one or the other, but they're not really going to get too much out of it. Whereas profit, they're going to tend to be more rational because profit is at stake. But they can be, again, they can be irrational by lying for the sake of their brand. And then I've concluded that government is less rational because they're based on what they think is best for the country, not necessarily what is best. For example, people fighting for a country. Sure, that's great if you want to argue that it's great, but how great is it to send people over there for the purpose of, or the possibility of dying for your country? What are you fighting for? So many people who have gone and fought come back later and like, let's just say I know multiple people who are like in their 60s to 80s and they look back and what did we fight for? They feel like they were lied to. They didn't even know what they're really fighting for when they look back in hindsight. And then, realistically, how rational are running presidential candidates?
I would say that the two that we've got now are highly irrational.
So,
The interesting point about government that you have is that one of the things that may make government less rational is that can the government go broke?
Yeah.
No, I mean, when you have the ability to engage in unlimited amounts of debt or in the unlimited taxation of your populace in order to make up the difference, you don't have that profit margin, so you may be less rational. All right, very good. We have the chameleons.
Their decisions for individual consumers, their decisions are on a smaller scale on a day-to-day basis, whereas bigger businesses do not see the immediate effects of their decisions. Therefore, when the effects are unveiled, it's already affected a larger number of consumers. Like one example is Enron, how they lied about all of their stuff and it didn't affect.
So does that make it rational or irrational? Do you think it makes it irrational? I think that's right. If your decision making doesn't result in immediate consequences, if I put my hand on the stove and it burns it, I'm going to learn real quickly not to put my hand on the stove. But if I put my hand on the stove and it doesn't burn it, it just gets warm, I may not sense the danger for a long period of time. Okay?
So like as families, there's more at risk, if dad doesn't go to work that day, it affects his family as a whole. But as a bigger corporation, if one person doesn't do something, it doesn't affect the
Okay. All right. So the impact again is a factor. All right. Anything else? Okay. Very good. One more dinner done.
We said that the business itself is rational, but the people who run the business are irrational. The people are irrational because they respond more to the environmental stimuli. However, the fact that 95% of businesses that start up or fail in the first 5 years also proves that they make irrational decisions as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. The fact that the vast majority of businesses fail is evidence that maybe they're not rational. Because if they were rational, they wouldn't fail. You might not bring something to market that you've done a lot of testing on and found out that there's absolutely no market for it. Okay?
Decision making is nearly always uncertain and risky, making it difficult to make a truly rational decision that leads to rational action.
Okay.
Companies try to reach out to people, but they're not logical in the way that they reach people. They'll fail because they will run off all people. And we had one example of Polaroid. They failed because the technology advanced faster than they were able to keep up with things, and they were still promoting their obsolete product. People had digital cameras.
Right. They're still promoting that instant photo, which was a really big thing in the 1970s. Not such a big thing in the age of Facebook, when you can share your photos instantly with everybody, right? Okay. All right. Very good. Good job. Let's get those in. By the end of today, you have until midnight to turn those in. So, yeah, I think with regard to this question, we have three broad categories: for-profits, business services, nonprofits. also provide goods and services to a constituency. They just don't have a profit motive in the governmental entities. And I think we run into rational actor theory or irrational actor theory in all of these. And I think that you find maybe a synthesis approach in that those businesses that do succeed and are highly successful over the long haul generally act more rationally. Companies like Johnson & Johnson, Philip Morris, 3M. Government entities may act irrationally because, again, you can simply tax your way out of a problem. But we hope that through the electoral process and through the democratic process that maybe we get good decision making. But maybe that's not necessarily the case. What is the most efficient form of government? Is it a democracy? It's not. The most efficient form of democracy, or the most efficient form of government is what? A dictatorship. Yeah. Where I make the rule today and it's carried out tomorrow. So we may have irrational motives because people are sort of interested in their own vested interest in the government and may vote for people who represent their vested interest over the interest of the whole. So industrial markets, the for-profit markets, there are 7.7 million entities. There are 365 million people in the United States. So why wouldn't you as a business person decide that you'd rather sell to 365 million people rather than the industrial markets, the retail markets, or governmental entities, which represent a much smaller scale of market than the consumer market? Well, the answer is that there's still a lot of money to be made. Even though there are fewer producers, or fewer buyers in those industrial, for-profit, non-profit, service sector industries and governmental entities, it still represents a huge amount of money that you can make. So in the industrial markets, these are producers or reprocessors who produce a product or service. They take raw materials and manufacture it, or they bundle services and provide it to other businesses, insurance products, things like that. 75% in our economy in the United States are now service industries. So the service industry, and we'll talk about services, is becoming an increasingly larger part of our economic well-being. That's one of the things that you're going to hear a lot about from all of the candidates, including the vice presidential candidates tonight, is that we've lost manufacturing jobs. That's true, but we have transitioned really from a producing of tangible goods economy to a services economy. Where is the real money in our economy today? In what kinds of industries? It's in technology, which are intangibles, and what else? Finance, banking, legal services, things like that. Information technology, information services are going to be really the heartblood of the American economy. And so even in the industrial markets, you see that services make up 75% and only 25% are now selling physical goods. Then you have reseller markets. There are 1.5 million retailers, 435 wholesalers. These are businesses that largely do not do anything to the process or redesign the product in any way. They simply resell it to the end users. So wholesalers sell to retailers who then sell it to the end user or consumers. There are about 1.5 million and 435 wholesalers. So again, it's a big market out there. And then we have governmental entities. We have a federal system, which means that we have technically only 2 levels of government, but for all intents and functional purposes, we actually have 3. The United States Constitution doesn't talk about local governments, but local governments organized under the umbrella of the state constitute a significant portion of our economy and provide an economic engine for many communities. So local governments in many instances are the primary employer in an area. The city of Guthrie, where I live, is the largest single employer in the city of Guthrie. There are approximately 89,500 entities at the federal, state, and local level, and they comprise an incredibly important market. We buy all kinds of stuff from businesses to support our mission here at UCO. What kinds of things do we buy so that we can provide services to you? Well, carpet. We bought carpet for this room. Wi-Fi, projectors, light bulbs, whiteboards, paint, They pay me, yes. I am technically speaking, when I used to teach public administration, I used to ask my students, what's your opinion of a bureaucrat? And they would have this very pejorative opinion of a bureaucrat, somebody who's lazy, doesn't do anything, has a big coffee stain on their tie, bad, clothing, doesn't care about services. And technically, what am I? Technically, I'm a bureaucrat. I work for a governmental agency and provide a service to the citizens of the state of Oklahoma in two ways. A, I provide a direct service to you in terms of education, and hopefully when you go out, it's providing a service to the state of Oklahoma because you will be what?
Educated.
Educated citizens, educated, productive citizens, and I'm a bureaucrat.
The government usually run in, that be more service related product or both?
Governments provide both tangible services or tangible products and services. So for example, what's the biggest source of revenue for most local governments? It's actually a tangible product. Okay, that's a tangible product, but what do they actually charge for? Water. The biggest source of revenue for most cities in Oklahoma is their water. They sell water. That's a tangible product. And generally that's done through a public works entity, and they buy all kinds of stuff, piping, lift stations, water plants, things like that are industrial in nature. And then they also provide intangible services. What are the services that we provide as a government?
For intangible?
Yeah, intangible.
Protection?
Protection. How do you measure police service? How do you measure a unit of police service? It's a service, right? Fire protection, things like that are intangibles. Measuring domestic and global industrial markets, reseller and governmental markets. In the North American Free Trade Agreement, we have the NAICS, which measures industrial markets among Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And it's a valuable source of information for businesses that engage in business-to-business marketing. So it measures economic activity among various sectors. It studies market share, the demand for goods and services among various sectors, and import and competition factors among the three. And it also corresponds with the international classification system of measuring global markets. So it's enormously important. We'll talk about global markets in the next chapter. It's most businesses and even governmental entities are going to be engaged in a globalized world. We are no longer a nation that can wholly rely upon our own source of wealth and natural resources to provide everything that we need. And so this is an important classification system. It uses the 6-digit code, and there are a bunch of questions on the second exam that ask you about this 6-digit code. So the first 2 digits, and there are questions that actually ask you what the first 2 digits, the 3rd digit, 4th, 5th, and 6th digit represent. The first 2 digits represent a sector, for example, agriculture, mining, or construction. The 3rd digit represents a subsector. So for example, digit 6 in the 3rd place would represent the construction of buildings, whereas 7 would represent civil engineering. The 4th will represent an industrial group. So for example, if you have construction, it's 1-1. Construction of buildings would be 6. The industrial group residential buildings would be 1. So that would be in the 4th place. The 5th designates a specific industry. For example, residential building construction. So actual contractors that are engaged in the residential building. I posted this, by the way, under the content tab of B2L, so you don't have to write it all down. You can find the PowerPoint there. The 6th is individual country level, national industries. So for example, new single-family residential housing. Not all of the countries have the 6th digit. Canada, for example, and particularly if the country has a lack of diversification in that subsector, will not have the 6th digit. It allows for the determination of growth in various sectors, so we can measure the growth in these sectors. Which sectors do you think are growing the fastest in our economy? What? Residential? It's actually technological industries are growing the fastest in the United States. The determination of marketing opportunities can be determined by the surveys that they conduct. And of course, the one limitation is that there are only 5-digit codes available for some areas of the sectors if there are not enough in the country or too few organizations exist. But it's an important way of determining how it is that we can engage in these kinds of international trade and business in various sectors of the global economy. So characteristics of, and I'll probably have to stop with this one, characteristics of B2B. Characteristics of business-to-business marketing are slightly different than the characteristics of consumer or business-to-consumer marketing. The biggest difference is, and one of the things that makes it perhaps more rational than consumer marketing, is that demand is derived. What does that mean? You buy a product for your household because you want it for your own consumption. Do businesses, when we bought this carpet, did we buy this because we wanted it, because we, sat there like Gollum in the Lord of the Rings, my precious? No, right? We bought it because we wanted to do what? Be able to provide services to you, and one of the things that this does, for a long time, all of the college of business classrooms had this god-awful tile, and particularly in a room like this, what does that do? Yeah, it echoes. It made the acoustics in this room almost to the point where you couldn't hear at the back of the room. So we bought the carpet. We put the carpet down because we wanted to be able to do what? Increase the quality of the service that we provide to you as consumers. So it's derived. We didn't buy it because we wanted it for our own use, or because we liked it, or because we thought it was a pretty color, which it's really not. We bought it because of the function that it would provide to our constituent group. The size of the market is typically, the size of the sale is typically larger in a business-to-business sale as opposed to a business-to-consumer. So when you go and you buy Reese's peanut butter cups because it's Halloween, how many Reese's peanut butter cups are you going to buy? Yeah, maybe 6, maybe a package, right? How many is a convenience store going to buy? Well, they're going to buy in cases. The number of, so the sale size is typically larger. The number of people that are purchasing is generally smaller. So for example, Ford sells to roughly 3,100 dealerships throughout the United States, but they in turn sell to how many? What is the number one selling truck in America to this? The Ford F-150. So how many Ford F-150s are there out on the road? They sell millions of units a year. The buying objectives are generally more objective. They are to increase profit or reduce costs, or to increase the revenues that the business or the entity produces. We'll continue on and we'll move into global markets. I'm out of time, so we'll pick up with this on Thursday. Be sure and sign the roll sheet. If you came in late,